A lot of the problems in our society would be solved if we brought back the birch and caned young people. Hello everyone. Today's presentation is about corporal punishment, the idea that we should strike people as a form of punishment. I'm old enough to remember when that still happened in schools, and certainly when I was at school, people were caned by the head teacher. And in fact, caning only actually went out after I'd started teaching myself in 1987. So not really that long ago that people were still being caned in British schools. Now, we now, 45 years later, think of that as a sort of a very barbaric or an unacceptable form of punishment. And yet that's a relatively modern belief that we now have. And many places, of course, still have beating as a form of punishment. And I'm going to pick one of those places. I'm actually going to look at Singapore, not because I've got any special criticism of Singapore or any criticism of the state of Singapore, but because it's an interesting one, because it's a place where Buddhism is a large religion there. Buddhism, which is a religion which focuses on non-violence, which focuses on not causing suffering, and yet it has beating as part of its penal system. And our challenge in the West is to think about whether maybe they've got a better idea and maybe we were wrong to ban it in 1987 in schools. And let's try and unpack it. The Bible itself does have certain things which actually might give us insights into whether it's right or wrong to beat, because the Bible was written at a time when people were regularly beaten for all sorts of reasons. So for example, and you can see this reference scrolling along the screen at the bottom here, it says, "Discipline your children, they will give you peace, they will bring you delights you desire. A rod and a reprimand impart wisdom, but a child left undisciplined disgraces its mother." And there's many other from that book of Proverbs which seem to indicate that actually beating a child is a good thing and a right thing to do. Let's think about why we actually punish people at all. Because actually the reason why we punish people at all may give us an insight as to whether this in itself is a particularly acceptable or unacceptable form of punishment. You'll often hear people on the telly talking about justice. Oh, I want justice for him. Or I want and justice is an important word here, but often it's quite a confusing word and a word that people don't use the same way in different circumstances, because when people are talking about they want justice, they're often talking about revenge, or as we might call it, retribution. And certainly one of the aims of punishment is retribution, the actual idea of showing something how bad it is by making an example of the person, by really laying into them and making it a bad thing. And retribution would often be put forward as a strong reason why you might want to beat someone, to set an example of how bad this thing is that the person's done. And I can remember as a child when people were caned at school being very horrified and shocked and thinking, oh, well, I don't ever be put in that situation. So I suppose you could argue there is something there that's working from that point of view. It is having a retributive effect. And that ability to achieve revenge, if that's the right word, might be a good aim of punishment. And if you look at the other two that occur in the AQA GCSE specification, it talks about deterrence, putting people off doing things wrong. Well, again, beating may well fit into that one. And reformation, making people better so they don't do the thing wrong again. And again, well, I was beaten as a child and it's made me a better person, I wouldn't do that again, might be an argument that you could put forward. So is it right to physically strike people if it meets those aims of punishment? Or is there something fundamental within the principle of one person beating another person which is in itself fundamentally wrong? We wouldn't, for example, advocate stealing from people if they were thieves, however much we might think retribution was a jolly good thing. But those arguments, which it's the same argument that's put forward for the death penalty and the argument that's put forward for striking people, for having corporal punishment, maybe they don't hold up so well, because there are certain inherent dangers. The first is, what does it say about you as a person that you are able to beat someone to make a point? Doesn't it in fact make you even worse than the person who's done the thing wrong in the first place? And that's the argument that you would always put forward, that it says more about you, the beater, than it does about you, the person being beaten. And certainly stories from the past of sadists and people who got off on beating school pupils are well documented. So all in all, as we're describing the human condition, then beating doesn't seem to be a particularly great thing. Singapore would put forward and say, well, actually our crime rate is enormously low, and beating people is one of the reasons why we keep it low. Well, you have to think about that one. Would we rather live in a society where you could be beaten but be safe, or one where people didn't get beaten and there was perhaps more risk of crime as a result? That's for you to think of. Certainly, I mean, I don't like to give my own opinion, but certainly I feel that the beating of people is not something that's a good thing. I don't feel it's right. It's not compassionate, it's not loving, and it doesn't fit in with my own moral worldview. But there is a debate to be had, and that's the whole point of these presentations. I hope you enjoyed that. Don't forget to put some comments or like the video, or indeed subscribe to the channel if you've not yet done so. Take care. See you again. Thank you for watching.